First of all, a warm welcome to the audience, to my colleagues of Eurocloud and my friends. I'm glad to be here, and a big thank you to Eleanor to make this happen. I know it's a lot of work with you and your team, of course, in the back end. And yeah, I think thanks, Michaela, for your impressive overview about what NIST is doing. It's a very important job. On one hand, it shows the complexity, how to address cloud security. But we are all aware that we never achieve 100% security. We have to take care about risk mitigation so that it can be handled for both sides, for the provider and for the customer itself. And we also identified there's a lot of complexity looking at all the controls and the criteria and the work to be done. So we identified this as a real issue. And we want to support the market by reducing the complexity with NG-Cert. What does it mean, NG-Cert? NG-Cert is an acronym for Next Generation Certification. You already addressed this topic, how to assess, how to audit the providers. It's difficult, and you have different point of views in terms of security. So we need an approach where we cover both interests from the provider side and from the customer side. And in between we have the auditors who are taking care to provide evidence that the controls which are exposed by NIST, for example, also by Star Audit, are done correctly and executed and performed to meet the goals to get more security and more resilience for the cloud services. Now, NG-Cert, this is the overall landscape, and I warn you, there's a lot of stuff inside. Don't try to understand everything of the charts, because they might be complex. But we have a 20 pages white paper, which explains in depth the sense of NG-Cert and where we are right now. So just get in touch with me or get on the website, and you will get hold of the white paper, and just follow what I'm explaining as the most important points. It's a research project which is funded by the Federal Ministry of Education and Research in Germany. And we have a, so let me just click again. Just moving to the, our starting position is we have a lot of certificates in place. I can list at least 30 or 40. Up to 10 of them are relevant in the cloud space, but they have some variances in terms of scoping, in terms of objectives, in terms of validity terms, and the coverage. So when we talk about the cloud, in most cases we are talking about security, which is right. But especially in Europe, and with our fragmented regulation, we have to take care about data privacy, about regulatory requirements, which is even more complex, and we need to show the dependencies between these various objectives. And all of these certifications are retro-perspective. So when an auditor shows up, he can just look what happened in the past and how are you prepared for the future. But you don't know what happens the next day, and you don't know what will change within 3 months. And this is the most important issue within cloud space, because it is very agile, and we want to have it agile. There are a lot of changes, and just one click and you're in a different network, just one click or just a move of a container and you are in a different geo-region. And you have to get aware about this, because you are bound to external requirements. Which means, on one hand, we have a dynamic and complex market, and we have the retro perspective of certificates with at least some lack of transparency for the users, who are obliged to take care that their data are getting secured, that their data privacy is respected, and that they are still the owner of the data. So keeping data sovereignty is one of the key issues to be addressed by any of the projects. Our targets, on first hand, it is research and development of a dynamic certification, as I said, for continuously detecting the certification status. So our aim is not to look at one time, is everything okay, but to enable any kind of auditor to show up whenever he wants, or even the customer, just show me what happens within the last 3 months. Is everything okay or not? which is related, of course, about security and privacy parameters. And it should be also matched with the new upcoming European Data Protection Regulation, which combines a lot of requirements in terms of data privacy. It should also ensure legal compliance. So having the link between what we are approving and how does it match to a requirement which is exposed by the regulation is also important. Besides this, it should be automated, because this is also a cost factor in terms of certification. And we need any kind of cloud monitoring on demand whenever it is necessary. So these are our key goals to achieve with the project. Now, therefore, we have a team with Fraunhofer, which is our entity for research in Germany. It's a huge association supported by the government. We have Eurocloud on board. We have Fujitsu as a global player, which is addressing the global market with infrastructure services. We have also a governmental data center and 4 universities. Each of the universities have has a different scoping. Some are more in the area of legal compliance, legal requirements. Some of them are more in the area of technical integration and interfaces. And so we have a good mix of industry, of associations, and universities to get together. And it's a 3-year project until 2017, and I'm just showing now the intermediate results of the project. So our approach is, as I said, we have certification with the requirements. And Michaela showed us already some samples how it works. By the way, we are not competitors with CSA. We also work together and we try to find synergies, but we are working in the same area, of course, in terms of getting quality on board. And I think the differentiation is we have a wider scope, but we are not having this depth in some of the security elements. But no problem to work together. Now we have the cloud services, and we are trying to identify automated or semi-automated validation of requirements. So when you go look at the ISO, you have an objective, you have a control where you check, or the auditor has to check and approve that the control is fulfilled. And we are considering why can't we use automatic measurements to support at least the assessment of this control. And we have to do some aggregation analysis of cloud service operational data, which is a tricky thing, because most of the metrics must be done within the framework of the cloud service provider due to security concerns, which means we need a level of standardization of interfaces, we need access to internal information, which has then to be aggregated and made persistent for automated auditoring and monitoring. But we have a semantic gap we want to fill between the certification and the cloud service information of operation. And we are already aware we are talking about complex event processing. So whenever we have to check about any login, about any outage or whatever, this can happen every millisecond. So we need to feed a system, and this is a very complex processing area. Therefore we need also data process models, some machine learning, data mining, and some monitoring and auditing tools. These are the 4 areas we are addressing with NGCert to close the semantic gap. We also ask the market, what are your key targets? And of course, we ask the customer, on the first place, they are asking for functionality in terms of performance, security, whatever. So they want to make use of a cloud service. But then they would like to, as the second point already, legal certainty. So if they step into a cloud model, they don't want to face a situation 3 years later that something has been made wrong and you can't fix it backwards. So they want to be clear that if they make the step into the cloud, they are achieving, they use a model which is in compliance with the legal requirements. Which leads us to contracts. Any legal commitment is based on contracts, so you need appropriate contracts and terms and conditions. And another point, which is the paranoia of the European economy, talking about geolocation. So there are still constraints, and they will stay, that due to regulation, for example, for special data, it is mandated to keep them in a certain country, or at least in the European Union, or probably it is allowed by special agreements like Privacy Shield and so on to move it outside this regulated area. They would like to get flexibility, integrability, and transparency. And transparency is still a key factor we are addressing also with our various programs to get an understanding. And you said already, cloud services supply chain. You have one entity who is offering the service, but you do not know if they are using other services in the back end to fulfill the service. Which brings us to the various areas. 3 key topics from the approach. We always see a cloud service announces availability of 99.99%. So what does it mean? Does it mean just a ping? Does it mean, yes, I can connect to the service? Or shouldn't we have a different approach? Can I control the service? So what are the requirements and the criteria that a customer is enabled to control his service he opted by the provider? Which means we need a differentiated approach to understand what is a term of availability. And the second point is, well, Korra is a German abbreviation, so I don't want to translate it. It's more, we need a link between the regulatory framework to the technical measurements, and because at the end of the day, any kind of measurement or auditing is nothing else than an evidence if you have a problem with your provider on a customer, from a customer point of view. So we need to strengthen the message which is set behind the objectives and the measurements, that it is reliable if you go to a court and you have a dispute on the quality of service. And the third point is the semantics. And I heard with interest about your approach to define a language. We have a similar approach to find a domain-specific language for auditors, because as soon as we have a pool of measurements, they should be able to combine them on a mutual base to find other, to address other objectives which are in scopes, probably which are not yet aware of. Which means we need a model where we can make use of the data in a different way by using a structured language approach, and the auditor can just type in a special query about measurements to get a result, and then he can interpret these messages or these results in terms of his audit goals. And the last approach is, yeah, we have to have we made some stock taking about ISO, CSA, Eurocloud Star Audit, all the different schemes which are in place to find a matching and to find common objectives. And we scoped on those common objectives in terms of automated measurements. So part of the project is also research. If we have this measurement in place, how can it be used with the various certification schemes to support the auditors to reduce the effort in terms of auditing and to have more reliability in the statement behind it? Because we know most of the audits, they cannot check the complete bandwidth of a certification. They check the general information they got, they have an idea, here we have some point where we need a deep dive, so it's just a specific check of various points to get an overall idea about proper processing of the service. Okay, so our proof of concept and our scoping is, right now we are scoping out infrastructure as a service and virtual machines. We have requirements identified, common requirements out of most of the certification in terms of availability, but we have a graduated level that we check it on data center level, on hypervisor level, and on virtual machine level. And capable not just to reach a data center, can we pass through the virtual machine, and can we execute commands which indicates that I'm still controlling this virtual machine as it should be. The next part is geolocation. Can we identify where a virtual machine with specific data is located and identify ideally down to the data center postal location, but at least to a geolocation or a country space. And the third point is we are controlling the access to hypervisor, which is more critical, or the access to the virtual machine to get aware that there are suspicious logins or whatever, and also to assign rules and logic to indicate here is a potential issue, a security issue in terms of accessing the various systems. Okay. Which means this is our setup where we have some labs included, where we have an ng-cert monitoring component. We have, for example, with Fujitsu, based on OpenStack, various virtual machines. Some of them are located in Germany, some of them are located in Europe or in Asia or in the US, so we can identify the geolocation. And we execute these tests in terms of control availability, geolocation, access management, and in this specific case, we are using virtual machines with Windows operating system and Active Directory in the backend for the identity management, which is one scenario of hundreds of scenarios, of course. But we want to get an abstraction layer, and of course we are looking forward that we can do the same tests with Linux-based systems, with other identity management systems, whatever. So this is the technical layout. And then we need to create visibility. So if there's an engine with complex event processing, we need to show the results. And therefore we developed a dashboard to show the availability. And just with the availability, I think we had a 2 or 3 month discussion to find a specification for availability and to how to show the results in a dashboard. Because what does it mean? If you have an outage of 1 millisecond, is it really an outage? Or is it just an outage if it is a minute or 10 minutes? So what is the, in terms of service level agreement and in terms of availability commitment, what is an appropriate measurement to indicate here we have an outage? So at the end of the day, we decided we are just making a kind of block mechanism with variable parameters, and the customer can decide what is an outage time which indicates a real and error, and then we mark them as red. So these blocks are in this test case each block is a minute, and then we can just indicate within this minute we identified an outage. And they can make a deep inspection if this is really an outage, if this is a problem in terms of service level agreement or not, or they can fine-tune their parameters finally. We also have then the geofencing area, so we identified the virtual machine we are monitoring in this case is located in Frankfurt, which is fine, which is enough to have a proof of evidence in terms of geolocation. And we find a couple of vulnerabilities, I don't want to in details, and then it is not specifically an error, it's some suspicious behavior which should be checked by the provider, or the customer can have a look at it. Probably there were some logins which are failed, which is not an issue by default, but it might indicate someone is trying to access the system without authorization. So, come on. Here we go. So then you can get a more detailed view, and here you can see the detailed outages. At the end, the overall availability is still fine. It is in a good range. But here we have an indication there was something wrong, probably some millisecond dropouts, and then you can have a look at it and find more details based on the data we have. And just looking at the overall ecosystem, yeah, we have this, we need an entity who is taking care about ng-cert, about a trustworthy setup of ng-cert, of course, with the infrastructure provider who is hosting the external services. We have the various monitoring services, dashboards. the cloud service customer who is looking at the dashboard, the provider, sub-provider. We need a kind of supervisor authority because we are talking about auditing. We have the auditors in place, the certification authority, accreditation. So it shows it's a level of complexity, and we have to take care about this. This is also part of our research to have appropriate roles and specifications and the interaction model between these different entities. Now, okay. And we have various use cases. So the dynamic certification service, it can provide data for auditors and certification bodies. As I said, it's a kind of auditing at any time, whenever you want, for certain topics. In conjunction with the continuous data collection, data verification, so that we keep a repository of data to have the ability to make a deep inspection or a deep dive into the data where you see some serious issues in terms of auditing goals. But we can also provide a monitoring service for cloud service providers as a kind of proactive service management to reduce the risk. And further on, I think that we have our further outlook here is looking. The specification of this ANGI cert framework is, of course, we need a set of stakeholders who are capable and probably can get NIST on board to review the outcome of the project. But we also need business models and processes for the interaction model between the various entities. Beside the three controls, availability, geolocation, and access controls, which are already a kind of high-level controls, we have a target of around 20 measurements. And just to give you an idea, we made an initial assessment when we look in reference to ISO, we have the expectation that at least 30% of the key objectives can be supported or replaced by automatic measurements, which is already a tremendous economic advantage in terms of ongoing assessment. Okay, so what else? Yeah, right now we are in the process where we make a review with various auditors and certification authorities to show the results and the matching into their certification space and to get them on board for further feedback and input. We have, I think I could outline the strength. Of course, we have some weakness in terms of invasive controls. Because we need to get connected to the heart of the cloud service, which is a challenging part. But for example, we had a chat with Amazon and they shared already the results with their headquarters. Probably we get a feedback by Amazon how they see such an approach and if they think it can be also executed partially in some of their services. Of course, it's some investment in time and resources for the cloud service provider to set it up, to identify their interfaces and to have an appropriate setup, which is challenging, of course. Well, we will have a look. So right now we are taking care about this map to talk to the various entities and to get feedback and to move forward with the project to have a full result in place. So our future forecast is right now we are taking care especially about the requirements in terms of GDPR, which is in place in the next 2 years by the European Commission. We are trying to reduce or to develop a universal and minimal invasive test suite and configuration language. We see a high benefits for our partners and for the customers, so we are building focus groups to learn more from their objectives and key targets. We have to identify legal implications by using an ANGI cert service, and we are publishing continuously via scientific papers the results and the baseline story of dynamic certification. So I think last click. Come on. Oh. So this is my last message. Just get in touch with us if you have further questions or contact me directly. And I hope I could provide you a first insight where we are going, and I hope you agree that this makes sense. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Hi. One, let's say, more complex question.
Oh, good.
First, you are going toward something which is almost real-time monitoring. I would like to know if this is a request from the customers, the market, first of all, because it has at least two major issues: cost and security risk. And the second part of the question is, if you are doing this monitoring all the time, are you also legally liable next to the cloud provider in case of a breach? Thank you.
Okay. As you said, we have an issue in terms of how much data we have to capture. How does it impact the overall performance of the system? So we have to be very carefully. That's the reason why we have a global player on board who is definitely a source of record, who indicates if we go this direction, this might impact our infrastructure. So far, we are fine. They said, this is something we can accept within our environment. And we need to discuss strategies, and really need to outline it's a research project. We are not aiming right now for a product or a service which can be executed in the next year. There are a lot of areas to address to find a balanced approach to understand the requirements from the service provider side. And you also asked the question, the customer's point of view. Honestly, most of the customers are having a kind of binary approach. Either this is a reliable service or this is a not reliable service. So what we are trying to provide at first hand more transparency in the areas where they really said, I have some concerns because this is not transparent for me. I'm handing over my data, I'm handing over my processes to a cloud service provider, so I need something back to have the feeling of controlling it. And I'm just saying the feeling, but of course we cannot cover everything. We have to accept that if you use a cloud service model, you're handing over this type of IT services to another entity, and you need to build up a trustworthy relationship. And I think this is something to support a trustworthy relationship and to provide some more transparency as much as we can, as much as it is allowed. And this might introduce again a security issue. So we have to take care what kind of data should be kept within the provider side and is just accessible for auditors who are especially entitled, and what kind of information we can expose to the dashboard for the customer side. And this is also part of the research project to find a balanced approach between these two point of views. And it's complex enough, and the team is about 30 people behind it, with a lot of full spirit people, young people who understood the problem and who tried to find appropriate mechanism and just follow the further outcome, and the science papers are very useful to understand the approach, and let's see what happens within the next 1 or 2 years.